Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're taking a look at something I know you're all interested in. How to become more confident and clear English speakers.
It's a popular one.
Definitely popular, and, you've given us a bunch of great material on pronunciation.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, this goes way beyond just, like, memorizing vocabulary words.
It really does. It's more like mastering the music of English.
Exactly. And one thing that really stood out to me from all the stuff you sent over
Yeah.
is that it's not about getting rid of your accent completely.
That's right. The goal isn't to make you sound like someone you're not. You know what I think is so fascinating about all this material?
What's that?
Is that it focuses on making your speech as clear as possible while keeping your unique voice.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, accents are cool. They're part of who we are. But I can definitely see how clarity is super important, especially at work, professional situations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's some really neat tricks in this material to help do just that. Have you ever tried recording yourself speaking?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
It can be a little brutal at first,
Yeah.
but it's really eye-opening.
Oh, my gosh, yes. I remember when I was learning Spanish, I recorded myself giving a little presentation. It was like hearing a totally different person. I was like, wait, is that seriously how I sound?
I know, right? It gives you like objective feedback that you just wouldn't get otherwise. The materials also mention mirroring native speakers. Now, this doesn't mean copying every single sound,
Gotcha.
but rather focusing on the overall flow and rhythm.
Okay, so it's more about capturing the essence of how they speak, not trying to sound exactly like them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about maybe one of the trickiest parts of English pronunciation: intonation.
Ugh, intonation. It's like a minefield sometimes. Like
Yeah.
one wrong inflection and your whole meaning changes.
You're telling me. You hit the nail on the head. And this material goes right into that. It highlights how just changing the way your voice rises and falls can turn a statement into a question, or even make you sound uncertain when you're trying to be all confident.
Wow. It's amazing how much weight intonation carries. Can you give us an example?
Absolutely. Think about the phrase, "it's a nice day." If you say it with like a flat tone,
Yeah.
it just sounds like you're making an observation. But if you let your voice go up at the end, like you're asking a question, it can show surprise or even disbelief.
Oh, wow. That's so true. And it's not just like the overall rise and fall of your voice,
Oh.
right? There's also like the emphasis we put on certain syllables and words, which is what we call stress.
You got it. And this material really gets into the nuts and bolts of this. They point out that stressed syllables are usually longer and louder,
Okay.
and they can completely change what a word means.
Hmm.
Like a classic example, present.
Oh, yeah. Like stress the first syllable and it's a gift. Stress the second and you're giving something to someone.
Exactly. The materials also explain how stress patterns work at the sentence level, emphasizing important words to highlight what you actually mean. Then he goes on to talk about some common mistakes English learners make, especially with vowels and consonants.
Oh, this is where I really start to relate. I mean, some of those English sounds can be so tricky. I remember when I first moved to...
Oh, hold that thought. We'll get back to your story in just a sec.
Yeah.
First, let's take a closer look at some of those tricky sounds the material talks about.
Okay.
One that comes up is the difference between the short E sound, like in ship,
Okay.
and the long E sound, like in sheep.
Oh, yeah. I can see how even a small difference like that could cause confusion.
Totally. And then the materials go on to explain a couple more, like the sound,
Oh, yeah.
which can be voiced, like in this where you use your vocal cords, or voiceless, like in thing where you don't.
Yeah, I've definitely heard people struggle with that one. And full disclosure, when I first started learning English, I could never get the sound right.
Well, we all have our pronunciation struggles. What matters is that we recognize these common errors and figure out how to work through them.
Exactly. So now that we know some of these potential pitfalls, what's the best way to just tackle them head on? This material seems to really emphasize practicing with native speakers.
It does. And there are some practical tips in there that we'll get to right after this.
Okay, so we're back. And before we left off, we were saying how important it is to practice with native speakers.
Right.
Like, how do you actually do that?
Yeah, good question. Well, lucky for you, this material has some great ideas. One of them is language exchange programs,
Okay.
where you connect with someone who wants to learn your native language and you help each other out.
Oh, that's such a cool idea. I've heard of those, but never actually thought to try one out. What else is there?
There's also a ton of stuff online, like websites and apps, just for connecting language learners.
Right.
And hey, don't forget about just meeting people in person, like local meetups.
Yeah.
You might be surprised how many people in your area also want to improve their English.
That's true. I just realized something. This whole pronunciation thing isn't about reaching some like magical endpoint where you're perfect.
Right.
It's more like a process, an ongoing thing.
Yes. The materials are super clear about that. Consistency is key. Even just a few minutes of practice every day can make a huge difference.
Okay, so if we could pick just one piece of advice from all this great material, what would it be? What really stands out to you?
I think for me, it's how much they stress active listening.
Oh, okay.
They talk about really training your ear to hear how native speakers use intonation, stress, and rhythm. Like, you really need to understand how those things work before you can start making those sounds accurately.
That's a really good point. It's kind of like learning to play a musical instrument. You wouldn't just try to play a song without first listening to how it's supposed to sound.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, one thing that stuck out to me from all this stuff was the advice about recording yourself speaking.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a simple thing, but it's so powerful.
Totally. It can be a little embarrassing at first. But hearing yourself objectively can really show you a lot.
Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden you become aware of these little habits you have.
Right.
Or like these patterns in how you talk that you might not even realize you're doing.
Yeah, and the cool thing about recording yourself is that you can actually track your progress over time.
That's true.
Like, you can go back and listen to older recordings
Right.
and really hear how much you've improved. It can be really motivating.
It really can. Okay, so we've talked about a lot here today. Reducing your accent, intonation, stress, common errors, the importance of practicing with native speakers. It's pretty clear that pronunciation is a complex skill.
For sure.
But what's the big takeaway? What should people remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is that pronunciation is a journey, not a destination. These materials really emphasize that getting better takes time and effort and just a willingness to really embrace the process.
I like that. It's about progress, not perfection, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's about having fun while you're learning. After all, language is meant to be spoken and shared and enjoyed.
I totally agree. So what does all this mean for you, the listener? What's one thing you can do today to start improving your pronunciation?
That's a great question. To answer that, I think it's important to remember that there are so many resources available to help you.
Oh, absolutely. We live in a time where language learning tools are everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've got online dictionaries with audio pronunciations, pronunciation apps that give you feedback right away.
Yeah.
And, of course, there's nothing quite like connecting with another person, whether it's a language partner or a tutor.
Right.
It can make all the difference.
For sure. And, sometimes the simplest things are the most effective. Like, remember how the materials talked about practicing in front of a mirror?
Oh, yeah, that's a classic. It might feel a little silly,
Yeah.
but it really does help you be more aware of how you're moving your mouth and your face. And when you do that, along with listening to native speakers, it's like a full-on learning experience.
Oh, I like that. It's like you're training your ears, your eyes, and your mouth all at the same time. And, another thing that came up a lot in this material was confidence.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It's not just about getting the sounds right. It's also about saying things clearly and with confidence.
Exactly. And sometimes the best way to build that confidence is to just keep practicing. The more you speak,
Right.
the more comfortable you'll get and the more confident you'll sound.
Couldn't agree more. And remember, it's totally okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Actually, mistakes are a chance to learn and get better.
For sure.
So to all our listeners out there, as you're working on your pronunciation, be patient with yourself, have fun, and embrace the journey.
Yeah, and remember that the power of language isn't just about what you say,
Right.
but how you say it.
So true. It's like if you approach it with a sense of playfulness and you're curious, it becomes way more enjoyable.
Absolutely. And, thinking about this whole pronunciation journey, it makes me think of something that the materials didn't really talk about directly. The power of observation.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Well, think about those amazing public speakers
Okay.
or actors you admire, the ones whose voices just draw you in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What is it about how they pronounce things that makes them so good?
Yeah, it really is like unlocking some kind of code.
Yeah.
Once you start noticing those little things, you realize how much they change how we see the speaker and how we connect with them.
Exactly. And it's not just with famous people either.
Yeah.
Think about your everyday conversations.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed how someone's tone of voice can totally change what they mean?
Oh, all the time. Like my partner can say, that's fine.
Right.
But depending on how they say it, I know if they're really fine or if I should be worried.
Exactly. It's like you have this emotional radar,
Yeah.
And the really cool thing is,
Yeah.
once you're more aware of those little things, you can actually start using them yourself
Oh, okay.
to communicate better.
So it's not just about understanding how other people use intonation. It's about using it ourselves to be more clear about how we feel.
Right. It's like you're adding a whole new set of tools to how you communicate.
I like that. This has been such a great deep dive. We've covered so much mirroring native speakers, the details of intonation and stress.
Yeah.
But if you had to give our listeners just one last thought to take away, what would it be?
I would say, remember that getting better at pronunciation is a journey, not a destination.
Right.
Be patient with yourself, have fun with it, and don't be afraid to try new things.
Yeah.
The more you explore and practice, the more confident you'll become, and the better you'll be able to express yourself.
I couldn't have said it better myself. A huge thank you to you, the listener, for bringing us this fascinating topic. And of course, a big shout out to Expert Speaker for all the amazing insights.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, everyone, happy practicing.